We're going to kick it off with Congressman Rick Allen. He is no stranger to the Means Report and no stranger, I'm sure, to many of you. Congressman, thanks for taking the time to be here today.
Brad, thank you. It's good to be in the district. Of course, it's a great week to be in Augusta.
Boy, it sure is. And I am so excited to have you here, and I hope we can talk about all the issues that have been going on, beginning with the biggest that's happened since your last visit, and that's the attack in Belgium.
Yes.
And I want to know how that's playing out in the Capitol and what is being done in response as far as America goes.
Well, we got one of the few unanimous votes in the United States Congress when we voted to condemn the action. Obviously, national security is number one on everyone's list. And of course, it's important that we take an offensive strategy rather than a defensive strategy. And in the National Defense Appropriations Act, we asked the President to give us a strategy to deal with ISIL and to deal with these risks that we have around the world. And of course, all he wants to talk about is Gitmo. And of course, part of that National Defense Authorization Act would not allow him to close Gitmo. It required it to stay open. He signed that bill into law. And so, but yes, he basically, his strategy dealing with ISIL is more of the same.
What do you think is going to happen in the coming months? I mean, certainly we don't want to wait for another attack to decide what to do. Do you think America will have a role as far as taking this battle to ISIS, continuing to go wherever it takes to find them?
The Joint Chiefs of Staff, or with the committees, Armed Services, meeting with Joint Chiefs, Joe Dunford, who's our chairman, they've met, they've discussed various strategies, but again, the president is just unwilling to admit that we have radical terrorists trying to destroy our way of life.
What about within the halls of Congress? Do you find that same sort of resistance that you've described at the presidential level from your colleagues on the Democrat side?
Yes,
Really?
Yes. They're opposing basically pretty much any strategy to deal with this threat. I'll give an example. On the people say things move slow in Congress. Our Speaker Ryan, assembled a task force right after the Paris attack. That was on a Saturday. The attack was on a Friday. He assembled a task force on Saturday of committee leaders. By Tuesday, we had a bill on the floor to pause the refugee program in this country, both from Iraq and Syria. We got 300 votes on the House floor to pause that program out of 435. And that bill is sitting in the Senate as we speak.
Still stalled.
Yeah, and 300 votes means that we can overturn a presidential veto. But the leadership in the Senate on the Democratic side does not want to put the president in that position. Now, can you believe that they would do that, put the country at risk like that? It just, those are the kind of things that disturb me.
Let's continue to talk about the president, in particular, who it might be in a few short months. What is going on within your party as far as who you might or might not support come convention time?
Well, it's been quite a contest, and it's gotten lots of attention. I mean, can you believe 25 million Americans watched our debate?
No, it's huge.
Yeah, it's. I think it's got a lot of folks off the bench, in the game. I think that's good. I just hope they'll stay in the game. I believe that the people need to elect our nominee. I don't believe it needs to be any convention deal or backroom deal. We know the rules at the convention. I think the rules should be followed. I don't think that someone should get a benefit over another. I think that the rules are there, and the rules have been in place for some time, and we follow the rules, and that the people elect our nominee. And then once our nominee is elected, I plan on trying my best to unify this. This is what I do in business. What I did in business is get people to come together and make the right decision. And I hope to get our party together and do our best to get our nominee elected as president, because 4 more years of this progressive obstructionist government is going to put us 4 more years behind recovering and changing the direction of this country.
Well, if the people do get to have the say, then it's going to be either Trump or Cruz.
Right.
Who do you like?
You know, it's a toss-up.
I knew there was no chance you were going to answer me.
Well, no. I like Trump's a business guy.
Yeah.
I like that aspect. I think, and we need that in Washington. I mean, that we've got people up there that don't really understand how to get us out of this mess, and that's growing jobs and growing the economy. That's the only way we're going to get out of the mess we're in. And I think Trump understands that. Whereas, Mr. Cruz, obviously, I love his conservative values. He is a very, very bright individual. And, again, like I said, on certain days, obviously some of the things Mr. Trump says, it bothers me. He needs to, as Newt Gingrich has said, he needs to be more presidential.
Yeah.
And I would tell him the same thing if he was taking my advice. But meaning that, sometimes he can be offensive. And, I think the problem he's got is a lot of that has gotten him where he is because this political correctness has gone entirely too far. And so people love that about Trump, and I love it about Trump. He tells it like it is.
Does the party ever, you've done a good job in the past of sort of taking us behind the scenes up there, does the party behind the scenes ever try to push you or any other lawmakers in a certain direction as far as who to support?
No. Obviously, several of the candidates asked to see me.
Sure.
And of course, Brad, I'm a freshman. I'm new. I have, fairly limited influence up there.
Has Trump or Cruz knocked on your door?
Cruz's people have contacted me. I have not met with Mr. Cruz or Senator Cruz, and Mr. Trump rarely is in Washington.
What do you say when the people knock or call? Do you say, I'll think about it?
Well, Ben Carson, for example. Ben asked to meet with me several times, and frankly, I told Ben I wanted to wait until like January to endorse a candidate, and I was, like I said, this thing is so you don't know what to do from day to day. But then by the time I got ready to say, yeah, I'm in for Ben, gosh, he just dropped off and then he's out of the race.
Yeah, you just never know.
Yeah. So not that I'm trying to pick a winner. What I want is the people to pick, and I'll be a part of that. And then let's get behind our candidate and let's win in November. There is a lot on the ballot in November.
I want to talk about something that Donald Trump has pushed, and that's this wall that would secure our country when it comes to illegal immigrants. Your thoughts on immigration, and would you like to build a wall? I know that jobs are huge to you, and there's the fear that these illegal immigrants are just taking all the jobs.
Yeah. Well, we have to secure the border, okay? There's other techniques available. I like the wall idea, particularly if Mexico will pay for it.
Sure.
I think that's clever, and I think he's probably got a way to do that. But as far as we have to secure our borders. We have to secure our nation, Brad. The threat, our freshman class has been probably in more classified briefings than any freshman class in history because of everything that's going on in this world. We have to secure our borders. That's part of national security. I think that's what people are scared to death of.
Do you think that who becomes president is going to be key to that? In other words, do you think Hillary Clinton would work with you on immigration? Do you get that sense from her camp?
I don't. No, I don't get any sense from the other side that they're willing to do anything except just allow status quo, which is pretty much anybody that wants to can walk into this country, and plus, if they're smart enough, they can get whatever government benefit, or I think in California they even let them maybe vote out there. I don't know, but and of course California's embraced them. Embraced it. They said, "Come in. We invite you in." So, but it's the federal government. The federal government's job is to deal with immigration, not the state of California. The federal government needs to step in and say, "You don't come into this country illegally." Period.
When the main report continues, we're going to continue our conversation with Congressman Rick Allen, bringing you up to speed on what is going on in Washington, D.C., and talking to the Congressman about issues important right here at home. We'll be right back.